minor.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
So again, Mara would like an election of a vice chair and a secretary. I don't know if any of you have thought about it, are interested in doing that. I can tell you vice chair, really it's just filling in meetings if I'm not present. And kind of, obviously you've seen Katie do it in the past and me. So if anybody's interested in possibly doing that, that would be great. Secretary, I don't know if anybody's a really good note taker. I know I'm terrible at taking notes, so I would not be good at that. Or if you guys think that because Mara's not here tonight, if you think it would just be easier discussing this again next month. I know that she's going to continue to want somebody to step in, especially those who have, you know, been in the commission for a little while and kind of know the ropes, as opposed to if they get 2 new members and then one of them automatically becomes secretary or vice chair or whatever. So I guess that's something to discuss.
I'd have to say that's why I'm not stepping forward. I'm still too new to this to really know the ropes.
Right. I guess this is my second meeting, so I don't know that
Sure.
if I'm the right person to step up right now.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And I know Mara had mentioned last month at the meeting that whoever becomes the secretary, she does kind of have like an outline that you follow. Obviously that has not been shared. So, you know, if that's something you want more information about, you know, maybe we can, you know, talk about it at next month's meeting, or you can feel free to reach out to Mara and just see what it entails. I know pretty much our agendas from month to month look about the same.
And I might just interject that the secretary role, while important, because basically what you're doing is pretty much taking the notes for the minute and then at minutes for the meetings. And as Ann just mentioned, Mara has an outline. I know the vice chair, I could understand being a little more, maybe even hesitant from being new, but either role could be filled by the quite capable, intelligent people that we have in the group, whether you're new or not.
You really know how to sell it, Karen.
Yes. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, and I know I was kind of volunteered into the vice chair position, and that was when Katie was still chair. And honestly, it was just kind of at every meeting seeing what Katie was doing and saying, and dependent upon if there's any, public hearings or anything like that. So from month to month, it can be a little bit different, but nothing that I think any of you are incapable of handling, like Karen said.
Well, I know that it seems Mara does want us to do it tonight, yet would it be okay? Because I will say that I maybe wouldn't mind doing something, but I would maybe like to ask Mara a couple questions.
Sure.
So,
and I mean,
see what
this
I'm
is
getting myself into.
no, I completely understand. And I know this is kind of an odd situation. I mean, Mara usually is at these meetings, all the time. So I know it was something that was very pressing for her to miss. Typically, she is always here. So I don't think that she wouldn't understand why we would want to put this off. Again, I kind of encourage you, if you're thinking about possibly taking one of the positions, maybe reach out to her and she'll definitely give you a lot more information about what it all entails. And so, I mean, I'm fine with us holding off on that till next month. And, like we've said, we still have 2 vacancies. So hopefully by then too, we have a couple more members.
And when we have new members, you won't be the new kids anymore.
There you go.
Well, that's true.
Right. All right. So we will hold off on the election of the vice chair and the secretary until next month's meeting.
Something that somebody should make a motion. to maybe-
Yeah, does somebody want to approve or disapprove that decision?
I'll move that we push it to next month.
I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, moving on, it looks like we don't have any public hearings. Travis, you can kind of tell me this. I don't think we have any visitors.
No, ma'am, no visitors.
Okay, so no visitor comments. So we do have one item of new business, and it is a demolition recommendation. It should be in your link. This is for, sorry, I just have the address, 22 Wilshire Terrace. So basically looking over the staff memorandum, it looks like it was built in 1949. The city doesn't have any records pertaining to historic property for the subjected property. It has not been previously identified as an at-risk property. There are photographs identifying existing conditions of the structure. Looks like city staff provided photos of the home interior. So it looks like the applicant purchased the property in August of 2020, and they have with the, I guess, the intent of adding on, but given the current state and what it would include to do that, so they are wanting to demolish the entire property with the intent to rebuild. And it looks like staff approved the request to demolish the existing single-family dwelling. So I guess if you guys want to look over your packets, over the photos and that information, and then if anybody has any questions.
I have questions about it. Looks like Angela does too. This is a home that's close to me. So I went by it today and I had seen the things in the packet. The things that in the inspection were found wrong with the house were minor. The pictures of the house looks like it's in good condition. I just this evening see the explanation that they had thought they would add on to it, but then costs were prohibitive for that. They didn't want to demolish the house, but now they're going to do that. So my question is, again, because I'm new at this so far, I think we've only talked about garages being demolished and houses that had been neglected and really run down, and there was no question about that.
Mhm.
What do we do when a house that's in relatively good shape is being requested to tear down? Where is our responsibility, I guess? If it's not in a historic neighborhood, I understand we don't have that to fall back on, but and I also understand that we wouldn't be the committee that decides how big a new house can be and so forth. But it seems to me like a slippery slope that we let a house that's in relatively good condition and is surrounded by very similar houses of that era in this neighborhood be torn down for new.
Yeah, definitely worth considering. I can tell you, this is the first time I personally have seen a house in this kind of condition being requested for demolition. A lot of times, like you said, they're vacant or they're beyond repair. We have had a couple that we feel like they could have been saved, but were probably bought by a developer and they let it sit for a little while. This obviously, it sounds like it's the homeowners that are wanting to demolish to build a larger structure. So our city code, basically, we have to determine whether the property is of historic value. If we can determine if there was somebody prominent who had lived there, if there was some historic event that took place there. So unfortunately, unless we want to do further research into this property, to figure out if there is more of a historic designation to it than meets the eye, our hands are kind of tied. You know, we've had properties years ago that have been lost to demolition that would have been worth researching and holding off their demolition requests, because we could have probably researched and found some prominent information. So we as a commission redid the city code. I want to say this was probably going on a year or two ago. And that is something that I feel like Mara would send out or would be included in a packet. And I know you guys are, Jane, you guys are the newer members. I don't know if you've received any of that information, like if Mara has, you know, given you any.
I think we did get some originally. In fact, yeah, I'm looking at things that I had highlighted and so forth when I got them. I guess my concern is that, are we setting a precedent here that, in an intact neighborhood, Wilshire Terrace is a very intact, enclosed, kind of private neighborhood. Is this precedent setting, isn't it? You know, do we reach a point of no return if we allow one? Are there others coming down the pike? I don't know.
Right. And I definitely feel like if Mara were here, she would remind us that unfortunately it is the homeowner's property, to determine what they would like to do with it.
Sure.
It is our responsibility, as historic preservation, if we see a property that we acknowledge had some historic prevalence to the area and that we would be able to find that information, then that's definitely cause for us to delay the demolition request. I honestly, is intact and nice of a house that this is, I don't foresee any real historic either resident that used to live there or reason that this would not be allowed to be demolished. So unfortunately, it is a slippery slope. It's sad to see, but again, it is kind of up to the homeowner, and it's our job to say if this is a historic property and we can determine that we have that power, but if it's not, there's really kind of our hands are kind of tied. And especially since this has gone through the city and staff has already approved the demolition request, basically it comes to us as a courtesy to say, hey, if you guys can find some information to save this property, that's up to you. Unfortunately, I just feel like a brick ranch from 1949, I don't think we're really going to find anything.
Right. Well, I guess really the bottom line is we have to trust the process, that we allow this to happen and trust that approvals for what the next build is are in the hands of a good committee that will not make it be oversized for the lot and that kind of
It
thing.
will be
It
oversized.
will.
It'll look oversized and too large next to the other homes.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is, because that's what zoning allows right now.
Mhm.
So that's what's gonna look like. So, and from what I know of historic preservation, working in historic preservation, as long as I have, our only way of sort of preventing this sort of thing would be to it's a little bit, historic commissions tend to get a bad rap for kind of stonewalling people and making things take so long that no one's interested anymore. And they do it on purpose, of course. They know that eventually they might lose, but it's the only recourse that you really have. Because it's going to be pretty difficult to find that the neighborhood is historic. Yeah, it is something that I've also thought, like Karen, you asked the question when I was interviewed, how do we stop this? Well, how we stop it is by saying, get some more historic districts, say we keep groups of brick ranch homes. They're completely historic to St. Louis, and quite honestly, rather unusual to have such large groups of brick ranch homes. And especially red brick ranch homes. That is St. Louis, And so it is something I think that this individual would be pretty difficult to say no, because this would be all of a sudden. But in the world of saying the Historic Preservation Commission, rather than looking at some of the other types of homes or something, we use that as, we are looking at this group, and this group, and we're looking to see how do we keep those intact and so forth. And what it does is really discourage people from buying them to tear them down. And it's not, in a way, it's kind of a, I don't know what else to say, but a little bit backhanded in the world of doing things, and not necessarily what I personally like of historic preservation. However, we have a situation where, we're saying we need workforce housing, yet we let them tear down all of the workforce housing. So Webster has workforce housing. In fact, they have the housing that people would like to live in. People want a house with a yard if you live in a community of houses with yards. They don't want to live in a condo adjacent to the railroad tracks. So, it's kind of, I think it's difficult for this one, but I think it's something that we should address as a commission to say, well, we are looking at this, and a person who comes in needs to understand, we need to look at your house and this area to see, do we think that this is a special group of, whatever, ranch homes in the St. Louis area in Webster Groves. It's going to have to be in the overall St. Louis area just because there's so many. And I don't know if we could find something of this particular builder came to Webster Groves in particular and wanted to build those, and because maybe that's the case, the developer who built one of the communities that is like that in Webster looked at it that way. We're going to build some small houses to go with all these lovely old homes, right? So it could have been something like that, and that's a history right there. And all over the country, they've put together neighborhoods from the 50s and 60s right now. So, it's something that I think we should probably look at, something we could do to help with the community in general. So I can't say that helps this one because I thought the same exact thing.
Yeah.
It's a perfectly fine home. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And someone is going to build a bigger house. That's all this is. That's all it is. There's nothing wrong with it. They're just making up reasons to be able to do that. And that's their business. So, that's what they're going to do. They're going to go find a house they could tear down and build a bigger one and make money. That's what people do. So if they're allowed to do it, and unfortunately, it has to be a government regulation that, or something that keeps them from not doing it, or people will just do it because most likely the person would build a house, sell it, and move somewhere else. They won't live in Webster Groves, they won't. So I don't know. That's just something to think about. It's
I really like that idea of coming up with an idea of how to designate the area or the neighborhood like that because of its original roots. And yes, I look at this and this just makes my stomach churn. Especially because the last bullet on the first page says the applicant purchased the property in August of 2020 for $435,000 with the intent to demolish the existing structure, for the construction of a new single-family dwelling. And so it's not until we get to the last page. And the previous property has been owned by the previous owner since 2013, but it's not till we get to the very last page that we get the explanation that, they wanted to build on it and what have you. But I really do like that idea of, and to your point, there's nothing pretty much that can be done about this one, but the idea of trying to come up with, I don't know what would prevent us from coming up with a different designation for our community for workforce housing or for, historically and digging into that and seeing what we may do differently, which may discourage people from buying with the intent to tear down, because that's clearly the first thing that's on the first page of this letter.
Right.
Mhm.
There are a number of houses in that neighborhood that have additions that are very obvious add-ons to them. And I have no knowledge of when those were done, but obviously some people found that they could stay in those homes and add to them in a way that made them,
It's fine.
that fit their needs. Sure. So,
I've been trying to find our city code that we had worked on and updated. And I think this could be the edited version. I apologize. I can't recall exactly when that was put into effect. But just to read you a portion of that, it's so the HPC may delegate the authority to implement previously approved applications for certificate of appropriateness to the building commissioner for changes not visible for the street frontage, excluding changes to the primary structure or subdivision of a property subject to the section. So in determining whether or not to grant a certificate of appropriateness, the HPC and the city council on any appeal shall consider the following factors, which are not intended to be exclusive or limiting in arriving at a decision. One, whether the subject property can be put to any reasonably beneficial or economic use without relocating or demolishing any party of the subject property. Whether the owner will incur a substantial decrease in the fair market value of the property as a result of the denial of a certificate of appropriateness. Whether the owner will incur a substantial decrease in the pre-tax or after-tax return to owners of record or other investors in the property as a result of the denial of a certificate of appropriateness. The cost of the proposed relocation or demolition and any estimate of any additional cost that would be incurred to comply with the recommendations of the commission for changes necessary for the issuance of a certificate of appropriateness. And I apologize, I'm kind of reading this as I go, so I don't know if any of this is really making sense or hitting home. The structural soundness of any structures on the property and their suitability for rehabilitation. The economic feasibility of rehabilitation or reuse of the existing structure or improvement on the property in the case of a proposed demolition or relocation. And the owner's applicant's purchase of the subject property after the enactment of the relevant provisions of Chapter 52 without making the purchase contingent upon the owner applicant first obtaining necessary board and or commission approvals under Chapter 52 shall be deemed to be conclusive evidence that the applicant is responsible for his or her own economic hardship, if any, and evidence of deterioration due to willful neglect of routine maintenance and or commencement of demolition by intentional or reckless disregard of the city's requirement for a certificate of appropriateness shall create a presumption against the owner and or applicant that must be overcome by clear and convincing evidence before a certificate of appropriateness may be issued. So obviously I understand, you know, where you're coming from. This home could be perfectly livable if it was put up for sale for another family. It sounds like it is somebody who's living in this home who wanted to add on. Maybe the costs were more than what they anticipated. Maybe they decided that they couldn't do what they, you know, thought they were going to do when they bought the house. Again, unfortunately, our hands are kind of tied because it is the homeowner. It is up to the homeowner. If it's not in a historic designated area, if it's not a historic designated property, it's extremely hard for us to go against staff and hold up the demolition request. I mean, we could do it if we all as a commission decided this house doesn't need to come down, but we need to find some evidence to make sure that, you know, this gets denied. Then it would take a lot of time. It would take a lot of research. There's no guarantee that we would find anything. It would delay possibly the demolition. But again, I'm not sure exactly how that would go. I've been on the commission for 3 years now. I don't think we've ever had a property where we have, you know, denied the demolition request to do more research on the property. I know we have public
You
hearings.
haven't ever? You haven't denied one?
Not since I've been in here, no. We've had public hearings on properties in historically designated areas. You know, that's when city posts a public memo in the yard of the house, and the public is allowed to come and comment on it. And we've had those where we've declined that in the past, that demolition request, but nothing that has come across the desk during a monthly meeting. I can tell you, I personally joined the commission because I had noticed there were 2 properties that I felt were historically significant to Webster Groves that were lost. And I felt that had I been on the commission, I would have fought for those. And I know I've heard Doug say it before too. There were properties that he would have fallen on his sword for. Unfortunately, ones like this, our hands are kind of tied. It's not in a historic designation area. It's not a historic property to where we have intel that, you know, so a prominent figure lived there. I'm not exactly sure, to your point about saving, you know, the brick ranches, because they are prominent to the area and to St. Louis, how you go about doing that other than, you know, designating the street or the neighborhood historic or the property. I'm not exactly sure how we can go about doing that, because legally the homeowners are within their rights, unfortunately. And this is definitely something I would love to continue this conversation. I would love to have Mara here because I know she has a lot more to offer and provide on this. I'm not totally familiar about what the city can do, if anything. I know that, Karen, this kind of crosses into zoning boundaries. And so I'm not exactly sure what all we could do in a situation like this, if that makes any sense.
I think it's clear that it's not much that we can do with this. We can't just hold it up because, you know, I mean, there's not anything we can do. I mean, the staff has already recommended approval for the demolition of the property. But I do think, I'm never one to say it doesn't, you know, it's not worth pursuing whether there is some opportunity for us to do something different. And just because it's not been done before, it's never an excuse that I just take.
Sure. No, I completely understand that. I'm just telling you, as somebody who doesn't, I'm not sure exactly.
Oh, and I don't mean for this one. I'm not talking about for this one. This
Right.
is what it is. You know,
Right.
it's unfortunate. It is what it is. I'm just saying, I don't think it would be a waste of time to see, you know, just to ask the questions about what would what's possible in terms of looking at, these neighborhoods where these homes were built right after World War II, specifically for working families and what have you, and they, all of this. I don't think that, what I'm saying is I would never say, we don't have anything, a choice. That's not something that we can do. We don't know if we can do it or make that work or not. I'm would be very interested in finding out what the answers are to that. I'm very clear that we can't really do anything about this house. They've already advised that it's okay. The people own it. They bought it to tear down, and now they're ready to tear it down. And they're going to build something on there that's bigger than the neighborhood. And
I mean, I definitely agree that this is something we should continue into our next meeting with Mara there, because I think she can definitely give more insight into this. I wish that I had more information to provide. I'm not exactly sure how to go about that, but if it's something that we as a commission would like to pursue, I definitely think we do that. I know in the past couple of meetings, we've been talking about projects, because ever since I've been on the commission, I mean, I came in when we were finalizing, updating the city code to give the HPC a little bit more power when it comes to these demolition requests, especially with prominent properties. But ever since then, it's kind of been, and obviously we went through a pandemic, which made things extremely difficult. But we really haven't settled on a project for us to focus on and put research into. And again, I know Mara's mentioned in the past, it is extremely difficult when we're meeting once a month, sometimes not even if we don't have a quorum. I think if it's something that we are interested in looking into in a situation like this with a house that, could have been saved, and hopefully not more like it are to follow, maybe that's something that we get a subcommittee going to get more hands on deck, to get more people involved, to be able to work on it outside of our monthly meeting. It's definitely something, if we're interested, to make it as a project. I know we had on the agenda in the past to do more of the historic walks. We talked about Lustron, Sears Kit homes, Joy built homes, which are fine if we want to focus on those two. But I'm just saying this could be another project. If it's something that you feel you're passionate about and want to look into further, how can we go about making sure this does not become a trend, that this doesn't continue happening? What do we need to do in order to do that?
So one thing that we can do, so designating a historic district, which is what we would do with whatever the neighborhood we chose. Obviously you have to have some information to back it up, some research and so forth. But the city is no different than anywhere else in the country in that a certain percentage of the homeowners have to agree to the area becoming a historic district, right? So you can also, and then each one has their guidelines. So setting up the guidelines can be as strict or as lenient as a community chooses. And that's part of being a certified local government as well, that we can choose that. So we could make it so that it's not overly strict, which actually encourages homeowners to say, oh, well, that doesn't sound so bad. But, it's going to make sure that the people next to me don't tear down their house as likely and build this great big thing. And I just look at, at that, or it blocks my whatever, my view, or whatever it is, the houses stay the same. So obviously we have to do some research. When you say that about,
I know Mara has said in the past, a project that the HPC tried to work on, and this was probably years ago, was historically designating Tuxedo Park. I know that was something that the commission at that time was focused on doing. I'm not exactly sure how far it got. I don't know what the parameters were of that. I just know that she said it didn't go anywhere. I think they got pushback from community members that lived within that area. So I think this is definitely something, if we want to think about doing something like this, we'll put it on our agenda, possibly have it as a proposed project for us to work on. I think this is something we definitely need Mara here though for, because she has been through situations like this. She's going to have a little bit more insight. But I'm not discounting this. I'm not saying that, you know, we're losing this one on to the next. If this is something we want to look into more, I definitely say we put it on the agenda for next month and continue talking about it.
Yeah,
I like that idea very
too.
much. I'm thinking as we're discussing this, Wilshire Terrace has one entrance. All the houses, you know, are surrounded and you have to enter and exit. We have a newer one, but now getting old, and that's Webster Forest, where every house was built by the same builder. One entrance and exit, and there are 80 homes there that were all built within 2 or 3 years. And maybe those are neighborhoods to look at to designate because of the uniqueness of their time frame. We've got the Joy Build homes that we've talked about a lot that obviously happened a long time ago, but maybe we could be protecting some of these that have helped been built in more recent times before we encounter this kind of a move.
Yes.
It's only a matter of time that somebody's gonna want to come in and demolish something in Webster Forest. And
Yeah.
you know, those were grand houses at the time they were built and unique to Webster Groves because they were all built at the same time. I like putting it on the agenda for further discussion.
Well, and I think
And
this
study.
is something, I mean, obviously we have a couple new members and you guys haven't seen demolish requests as frequently as we have, as some of us have. And again, in the past, most of those are derelict properties that are beyond saving. This is a rarity. I've not
That's why it got my attention.
Right. So, but
To give you guys a heads
I'm
up.
wishing at this point that Mara was in this meeting because I feel like in this situation, she could have a lot more information about what we can do in a situation like this. And if moving forward, we want to protect the houses and the neighborhood, the subdivision around this house in specific. So I definitely think that this is something, if anybody's taking notes down, just to mention that, you know, this property that we discussed in this meeting tonight is something we want to continue discussing in our next month's meeting. But I will bring it back to, we do have a demolition request that we do have to vote on. I know in the past, Mara has said if you vote against demolition, I believe, and I don't know, Michael, I think you asked this question during one of our meetings. What would happen if I decline the demolition? And I'm trying to recall what she said. I feel like she said that you would have to provide reasonable information as to why you declined the demolition.
Yeah. So a few months ago, there was a similar scenario. There's a house that I could throw a rock at and hit. I think it was built in 1950. People still live there. A builder came in, bought it, wanted to tear it down. I think there's even still people living in it, but it was identified as unlivable. Essentially everything you've already said. And it comes down to, is this a battle you want to fight? Is there something that screams significance to do that? And yeah, if there's not within our purview, if it doesn't appear to be historically significant or doesn't have any obvious historical attachment to it, as you guys have already said, our hands are tied. I think Angela said it, you guys both have your masks on, so I apologize if I'm giving the credit to somewhere else. But I like the idea of educating people on what it is to live in a historic district, right? Because I think when you think of that, right, you think of these big historical districts in St. Louis, right? At least I do in the city. Whereas if you buy a house there, you've got to you're going to be paying just a ton of money to do anything. So where you were saying that it's not necessarily the case, right? Where there could be different designations for historical significance. I like that idea because yeah, I think we do run in, and again, right, I've only been on the board for 6 months, maybe. Yeah, 6 months. I think I joined in April, ish, right around there. And this is the second, so I'm going one per quarter, where we get a house like this that just makes your stomach kind of turn. Especially looking back on it, it absolutely, yeah, I think the first page says we bought it with the intent to tear down, but then on the later in the thing it says, but we always had the intent to add on. We didn't want to tear down. Which is it? You've cut your nose off to spite your face. You're telling us one thing, but you're also telling us the exact opposite. So that's essentially the long-winded version of her response. If anybody wants to fall on their sword right now for this house, they absolutely can. We'll slow the process down. But at the end of the day, is there enough of a conviction that you think you can find something historically significant about this house, specifically, not necessarily anything around it, just about that house, that you are more than sure we could come back and end up denying it? Or would it just be delaying the inevitable?
Yeah, and I mean, to that point, I think with the historic designation, I think you're right. A lot of people, homeowners, don't understand what goes into that. I think there's a lot of fear surrounding historic designation because it's, well, if I want to add on, or if I want to do this, I'm so limited. And I know, I hear chatter on Facebook all the time about people not wanting to get their historical society century plaques because they think that that's gonna prohibit them from doing any remodeling or anything. And it's like, no, that's through the historical society. That has nothing to do with it. So there is a lot of misconception around that. If that's something that we as a commission can work on to figure out a way to make it less scary and to find a way to be able to do that, I think that's definitely worth, doing. And I think a project like this, like I've said, is going to be more of a long haul. It's not going to be month to month meetings. I think we definitely would have to put together some subcommittee because there's going to be a lot of ins and outs and research and projects to do. And I think that's what we've kind of found as a commission over the past year or so. We just don't have the manpower. We don't have the time, sometimes we don't meet during the month. So things get delayed. So I think if we want to consider this as a project, I also think we need to be realistic about, okay, how can we do this and actually make some headway on it? So I definitely think that this is something we should continue talking about at the next meeting, hopefully with Mara present, because I think that we can get a better idea of how to go about this, what to start doing. But in regards to the demolition request, we do need to take a vote.
So I'll be the guy that does the dirty deed, right? I move to approve the demolish of this.
I will second that.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Are there any opposed?
Aye.
Okay. So we will make sure to put that on the agenda for next month to be continued on this conversation to hopefully find a project surrounding this so that we see less and less of this, not more. So with that, we're going to move on to our old business. We do have the Douglas Hill comments to City Council, the letter. I had put that together. I don't know if you guys have looked at it. If you have any revisions to it, any additions, any changes, anything like that. The reason that this was kind of prevalent is because we have to have this turned in, I believe, by Friday. So that's why it was kind of pushed to the forefront of this meeting.
I don't have any problems with it. I thought it was well-written and very diplomatic, much more diplomatic than I wanted to be.
I agree, Stephen.
I mean, I can tell you, I live directly across from where this proposed project is slated to be. My street is actually in question of becoming a through street. There's been talk about having possibly a light at the end of my street. My street's just a quiet little dead end street. I understand, but I felt that as a commission, you know, it's our job to present the historic facts, to make sure that this history of the area is preserved as much as it can be and it's acknowledged. So that's kind of where I was coming from. I understand, and I understand a project like this, there's high opinions, but I was trying to write in the view of the Historic Preservation Commission. Also with that letter, I didn't include them, but Jane did send a list of prominent names of historic figures that I am wanting to put on a separate page of the letter to follow kind of our recommendation. Jane, I don't know if Mara got back to me. I wasn't sure exactly where you pulled the names and the information from.
She asked me about that and I answered. They were all taken from either the North Webster book or the North Webster Walk, and some were in both.
Okay.
So I didn't include people that have already been acknowledged, like Gibbons, like you know, our early childhood center being named after prominent North Webster people, but pull names out that I thought were also important to the history of either the school or the history of North Webster. So.
And I was late in doing it, but I did copy what you sent and put it on a document, but I didn't get it tomorrow in time to put in with our packet. So I don't know if you have your list there, if you would like to read
I didn't bring it
off.
with me. I'm sorry, I didn't bring it with me, but I know I'm not supposed to send it out to the committee, so I just sent it tomorrow.
Okay. Well, I think what we're gonna do, I mean, if you're okay with that we're gonna use those names that you provided
Sure.
As an addendum to the letter. And I know that Mara can get that distributed to everybody probably before, I would think before Friday, so everybody can have a review of those names. If anybody feels that there's any more that need to be added. At this point, I think any and all names that we feel are prominent to North Webster, Old Webster, that we feel should be included in that, definitely feel free to do so. And then again, I don't know if I know Mara sent you guys the letter in our packet, and I don't know if anybody has had time to send any feedback to her, if you guys want to discuss anything tonight. I just know we do have to have the letter finalized by Friday.
I actually spoke with Mara today and she said she needed the letter by tomorrow. So I don't know if I'm gonna reach out to her in the morning. Maybe it's supposed to be Friday, but you know, just she's in at 8, so.
Okay.
Can I ask
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Michael.
I was just gonna ask, can I ask a unrelated but related question that maybe is a stupid one? There's a lot of talk about North Webster. Is that an actually like historic designated area, or is it just widely accepted that it is a historic area but not actually designated one?
There
It
are
is not.
properties throughout North Webster that are historically designated. I know the HPC, one of the projects they did, and this was right before I came on, they did a monument statue for the old Douglas School. I think just given the amount of information that we have, historic information from the Historical Society, there's a lot of well-documented information. And that is kind of what we felt needed to be in the letter, that it is honored, that it isn't lost. If this development does, make its way through and happens, that hopefully they will acknowledge what was there.
So that's where I say it's related, but it's unrelated, right? We were talking about designated areas. And there is, right? When people talk Webster, North Webster always gets brought up, right? It's part of the conversation. Could that be something that, and again, I know Mara has the answers to a lot of these questions because she is the proverbial shell answer, I'll say shell answer person, right? Instead of shell answer man, but I don't know, right? Like if we do designate certain areas and we can figure out how our committee functionally can do that, maybe it would make it more difficult for the SG collaborative to move in. And
honestly, I don't know if we have enough time. I'm not exactly sure where things are at with that. I don't know. Obviously, there are historic properties that are going to be included within the development. The church is remaining. The property at the corner of Gore and Pacific, which was originally a grocery store, like one of the first grocery stores in the area, that building they are keeping. I think we talked about designating land at the last meeting, and I'm still a little confused by that, how we would go about doing something like that. Because obviously the area of Shady Creek, there's documented history of, people worshiping in that area and century-old trees. So I'm not exactly sure how we would go about doing something like that, which can kind of tie into what we were talking about earlier with historic designation. I'm not, again, with this project, I'm not exactly sure how much time we would have with this specific location.
Yeah.
That's definitely a Mara question.
Yeah, just for clarification, Karen, to the unrelated aspect of that question, you were shaking your head no. North Webster is not. It is widely accepted as a historic area of Webster, but it is not actually designated as such.
No, I know the school is, Douglas School is on the National Registry for historical places. And I mean, I've actually had a conversation with Mara too about, because I even wanted to try to approach it from, what I learned is that you can designate land, you can designate areas. It doesn't have to be a building. And again, one of the reasons that people tend to be averse is that they think they immediately go to all of the limitations that are imposed if you do that. I know that First Baptist Church, which is, so yes, it was originally where Old Community is now. Now it's further down at Ravine and Kirkham, Brentwood, and they are in the process of getting a national historical designation. But in terms of that area proper, that entire area does not have a formal designation. And I was even at one time I was talking to the gentleman that actually owns the Tuxedo Park Bed and Breakfast, because that's basically what he does for is historical, is, working with historical designations and getting those things done. And one of the other approaches that I even looked at is, what if you have the churches in the area designated? But just looking at the different approaches you could take. But to answer your question, no, the area does not have a formal designation.
Thank you.
So going back to the letter, I thought you did a good job of being preservation oriented rather than just simply talking about the development or something. One thing I was wondering, the only thing, sorry, a little loud. The last sentence I actually like that you said, we have obligation to preserve this historical and cultural connection. I think that you could actually say instead as a commission, as a community, because we are simply representative of the community. I don't know if everybody else feels that way, but that's the idea. And Webster Groves is a historic community. Pretty much all it is a bunch of historic houses. That's kind of all we got here. Very, very little commercial. We don't really need more houses. We have very little commercial. We could use a little more. So we, as a community, are trying to maintain that. That's really that's what Webster Groves is. Without the historic Webster Groves, you kind of don't have much else here but a bunch of houses. So I think just a thought, just a suggestion.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, what I want is I want you guys to provide your feedback and your voices and what you feel should be included within the letter. So I'm definitely fine with, making that adjustment. I agree. And I mean, I guess I'm not really sure where to go right now because I thought we had a few more days on this. It sounds like we only have till tomorrow. So again, if you want to discuss any changes tonight here, we can do that. If you want to look it over and you feel that there needs to be something different or said differently, I think we definitely have time to still send that tomorrow. And we can get that updated. I just didn't know how much time you guys wanted to spend on that tonight during this meeting, or if you guys felt that it needed to sound differently or be worded differently.
I thought it was beautifully written. I really appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, I think it's nice the way it is. Personally, you don't have to, I have that one suggestion, but otherwise, if you want to pretty much leave it like it is in my view, I would be fine with that.
Okay, and I mean, again, like I said, we are going to have a second page that lists the prominent names, the figures, some of the names that were originally given to the land. So if between now and tomorrow you guys say, oh, I really want this person's name to be included in that, send it tomorrow so we can get that put together. I think the more suggestions, the better. And Jane did a really good job. I'm really sorry. I wish I would have had your name list in the packet. But you did a great job of pulling together some great information.
Well, I was stumbling on the North Webster book. Henrietta Ambrose and Ann Morris were the ones who wrote that book. But the Ambrose, she and her husband, she was the first Black person on city council and was president of the Historical Society and so forth. They were real trailblazers, but the school district has named a building after them. So I didn't include people like that have been acknowledged in another way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I really liked that about your list is that, a lot of the names that you presented did amazing things. And a lot of them I've never even heard of. So right. I think that's what's important about this.
it would be nice to see some of those acknowledged in addition to the Lockwoods and Swans and all the people whose names we know at the tip of our tongue.
Absolutely. I think I was possibly going to add one more name. The house next door to me was built in the 1800s, and I'm in North Webster. It's actually on one of the, don't think it was on, I think it was on the Northwest Webster walk. But the original owner of that house was the first principal of Sumner High School.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
So I thought that that would be something, because I feel like I never knew his name until we did the walks, and I live next door to the house that has his name on the plaque. So I feel like that could be something interesting to add.
Sure.
I guess if we're okay with moving forward with that, I will reach out to Mara tonight to make sure she has everything by the morning. And if you guys feel in the meantime you have anything you want to send her way for this, I guess we need to do that tonight or early tomorrow morning. Because I do think it was supposed to be that it's going to be allowed in by Friday the 12th was what she had in earlier documentation. So I don't know if we need to take a motion on this? I know it was kind of a project, but
I think we do need to take a motion. I don't see there's going to be a whole lot of debate about it. I would say I will motion that we accept the letter as written, barring any subsequent information you receive by morning.
Second.
okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay. So I know we have our potential projects for 2021, 2022, which are the Lustron Homes, Sears Kit Homes, Joy Built Homes, potential new historic walks or drives, as we have said. Stephen, I know you have information on Joy Built Homes, and I feel like you kept getting pushed off month after month.
A little bit, but that's okay.
I don't know if we want to discuss those projects some more tonight. I know it's kind of difficult with the small quorum that we have and Mara not being here, so I'm not exactly sure how much we would actually get accomplished.
Well, I think all I would hope is that we can look at what I've put together and say, that's definitely a project. Who wants to work on this? And maybe we can designate a team.
Stephen, did Mara ever tell you, like, I know you sent her some of your findings. I don't know if I know you wanted to present to us. And
Yeah, because a lot of it is stuff that is live documents that I wasn't able to send her a packet.
okay.
I sent her several things, and I don't know, that was linked in the agenda for this week, but I actually have a bunch of live stuff that I'd like to run through if I can take over the meeting.
Go for it.
Right, I'm going to share my screen, I hope. Let me know if that actually occurs.
We can see it.
Okay, what I did, I started on the Webster Groves Public Library site, and I found my house in the building permits, which I thought that was really cool. I found our house. It was built in 1925, which is a surprise to me. This is 1908, and there is Justin Joy right there on that building permit. So I took our house and I went to the draft of the Century Homes website that she sent out a year or so back. And I went to our block and I marked our house. Come on, come on. It's not coming up. Oh, that's because I'm on the wrong block. Okay, so I added our house. I put a pin right there. And our neighbor's house was built at the same time by William P. Joy or Wilford Joy. So I started adding these, and then I started running into some problems. If you get up here on Jefferson, this house, the county says it was built in 1915. Building permits say it was built in 1922. So we have a building permit that's 7 years younger than the house. I don't know what to do with that house. Here are 4 houses in a row by the Joys. I've also learned that the entire of Blackmer Place was built by Wilford Joy.
Wow.
I have identified between 1908 and 1918, 88 houses
Oh,
built
wow.
by the Joy family. And,
Wow.
and in that period after 1916, it's all Wilford because the father and grandfather had passed away by that time. Another problem I've run into is we have no records before 1908. The library only has building permits going up back to 1908. But I did discover in the library website, let's go back over here, wherever it went. I've lost it. I have so many things open. Oh no. Well, okay, back to the library.
Control Shift tab.
Yeah, I know. Tax records. I have identified hundreds of lots that were owned by the Joy family back as early as 1897. Now that doesn't tell us that they built a house, but it tells us that they owned the property. And if they didn't sell the property and the house was there the next year, there's really good odds that we could look at the house. I don't know if there's any way to prove who built the house, but let me get back to my other documents here. Map of Old. Edward Joy was known as the father of Old Orchard. Every newspaper article I've come across calls him the father of Old Orchard. And I have outlined a bunch of the lots from 1896 and 1897 that they owned. So I think a case could be made that we can prove a whole lot of this was built by them. I took the first 2 years, I've actually gone a couple of years down the road, and I took the same format that the Historical Society is using for tracking century houses, and I started plugging in Joy houses. I've added hyperlinks to photographs. I drove around and took photos of the houses. So these are all hyperlinked to photos of the houses. Some of them are definitely demolished. But I've up to, where am I, 1912. I've gone that far, identifying the houses and identifying which ones are still existing. I think that's where I am so far. Any thoughts?
Yeah, that's really cool. How many generations of Joys were there when it came to the actual them building?
There were 3 of them.
3.
Edward, Justin, and then Wilford.
So grandfather, father, son.
Yes.
Isn't there a Joy Avenue street?
There is a Joy Avenue. It runs parallel to Bompard off of Lockwood.
I guess I'm just amazed that none of these streets, none of these addresses are on that street.
Well, the surprising, it shouldn't be surprising because that was, I think, the main street of the Joy subdivision, which would
Okay.
have been built in 1896, long before we have any records. So what would really be handy is if we could get our GIS person back so that we could set up a separate map or just add different colored pins to the one we have. Because it's really easy to lose the Joy houses in with the Century houses, and it's hard to track them.
Mhm.
Also, I accidentally put a pin where I didn't mean to, and I can't move it, delete it, or anything. It's just,
Oh.
Whiteout is no good on this.
It doesn't work on a computer, does it? Doesn't a GIS.
all right,
So-
So I do have a question. This is just, you're an architect, right? Didn't you say you're an architect? Did you find any repetition in the houses at all?
they're all, through the period that I'm looking at, they're all very similar. Of course, I haven't seen any plans. I don't know if they all have the same plan, but they're very similar. I can flip through the photos and you'll see that there are a lot of them that are very similar. And let me see here. I thought I could flip through the photos. It's not going to be as easy as I thought.
Oh,
Oh, that's similar.
that is that one.
Yeah.
They look exactly alike.
It would not be hard to make a case that that was built by the same guy.
Yeah,
Right.
not at all, especially during that time period. Oh,
Right.
no, that one's different, yeah.
Mhm.
Now, these are all demolished, so I could not get photos.
Oh, but the same as the third one.
Very similar. Right next door, if you ignore the addition of the sleeping porch.
Yeah.
Sure.
Wow.
Are these all north of Lockwood?
Oh, that's.
Lockwood or north of there?
I believe that they are, yes. These are all in the Webster Park and Fairview area.
That's what I pictured when I think of Joy Built, but I didn't know if he ever came south of Lockwood.
Oh, absolutely. My house is a Joy house. It's almost down to Baker.
Ah, oh,
Okay, yeah.
So there's a lot of similarity in a lot of these houses.
Yeah, that's real different.
It's a little different, but it's getting later. So
Little bungalow, yeah.
this is more likely a Justin house than an Edward house.
Oh. Oh,
mm, oh, that's
who knows
interesting.
what happened there?
Hmm, that's-
And I don't know if you're familiar at all with Blackmer Place.
mhm.
Driving down that street, none of the houses are similar at all.
That's the same.
Okay, and I have to
Almost
confess, I
identical.
cheated here. I didn't go drive out to this one. That's Google Earth. And some of them you just can't. You just can't without getting up in the people's yard.
No,
Right.
I know when my husband and I were looking to move to Webster, and this was, gosh, 12, 13 years ago, and we actually had a contingent contract on a house on Fairview. And we were told it was a Joy Built house. It was built in the 20s. It's across the street actually from this one. But I know we've since driven by it. It had like a kind of a flat top roof. It was kind of like the angled roof, and then the top was flat. And I've noticed since whoever bought it, they've completely raised the roof and changed the pitch of the roof.
Hmm.
So
I
that's,
do want to point, oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
no, it's just, that's kind of interesting to me to see some of these, because you do see similarities, but then some of them you wonder how much they've been modified.
These two houses that I've got highlighted here are for the same address. The building permit, it's a smaller house a year later. So they got a permit, got the cost estimate, decided we're not gonna do that. And went back to the builder. Yeah, that one has been redone. I'm not convinced,
All right.
but it's, well, maybe it's just siding on it. And a new,
Right, that's
Right.
it, yeah.
It looks like they've just changed it quite significantly.
there'd have to be
Square
some,
is still there.
Mhm.
a lot of these are quite honestly, they look like they're the same house over and over.
Yeah,
Well, and they're just basic four square looking, kind of.
Four
Yeah.
squares,
Kind of
exactly.
four
I was thinking of four squares and bungalows. We've
Yeah.
got a lot of.
Kind of basic.
Yeah, some
Basic story
craftsmen.
and one story. For the
Okay.
times. Neat.
Okay, that's my spiel. What do you guys think? Is there enough here to chase?
I definitely think there is. I mean, when we looked at a house and we were told it was a Joy Built, I kind of looked into it a little bit. So I was kind of familiar with, this builder, and I think it's something very unique to the area that I don't think a lot of people living in Webster Groves really know about. So I think that's kind of our purpose, is to educate people on the history of our community. And I think obviously from the extensive research you've done, and there's probably a lot more to be done, we could probably detect enough to definitely do a walk. Or a walk, if they have to drive to different areas, but.
This area right here, the green that I'm circling, that was, I believe, all purchased by the Joys and subdivided. So I think this is all going to be them.
Have you found any deeds?
I haven't looked for deeds. But I'm sure that they are there.
So Steve, tell me again, when did the grandfather start building? In the late 1800s?
Yeah, it was right around 1895, 1896.
I started thinking about the number of homes we know were slave built, which meant 1850s, 1860s time period, and a gap of 30 years exists there that we didn't have a builder that was building large numbers of homes, quite different than what we had in our big homes before.
Yes. As you can tell, I've spent a lot of time on the Historical Society website, stealing all of the plats I can find.
I kept that database for a lot of years, so I'm familiar with that.
Webster Park changed a whole lot from the way it was platted to the way it was built. I've learned this. The actual map looks nothing like that.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
All of that area north of the railroad tracks
Uh-huh.
was originally part of Webster Park.
Hmm.
And this is, I think that's Swan and this is Gore and Gray. Yeah. And they, I know that there are Joy houses in this area. This is even older. I got this because I thought it would be germane to the discussion of the Douglas area. But the scan's not really legible at this scale. I believe this green area is the
Cool.
Porter subdivision. All right, that's what I've got.
Wow.
I mean, I definitely think it's something worth pursuing. I know at the last meeting, Jane, I believe you're the one that brought it up with the Lustron that, you know, there's just not many of them left.
Right.
It's not exactly unique to Webster Groves. Obviously, we do still have some, and that's worth preserving, as well as finding the kit homes. But I really feel like the Joy built homes, that's very Webster. You know, as a family, obviously they focused their livelihood in this area. So I think that's worth researching. And Steven's done a lot of that already. Again, I think with these projects, I just think that we're gonna have to do like subcommittees to get some stuff done.
Yeah, I have no idea how to proceed from where I am right now.
I would be fascinated by background material, what brought them to this area, what allowed them to build homes. We had railroads by the time they started building, so they could get materials more easily. But that whole beginning of their dynasty, if you will, of building homes, what got them to here and what made this so desirable?
I actually know this.
Good.
Edward owned a woodworking shop basically in Iowa, I think it was. And Justin grew up in the woodworking shop. They moved here and opened a lumber yard.
There you go.
And then when Justin got old enough, he thought, let's move out of the city. Let's move to Webster Groves. They got here and they said, let's not just buy a lot. Let's buy all the lots.
A lot of lots.
So that's when they started
Hmm.
the real estate company, and they bought up a ton of ground, subdivided it, and started selling houses. I've mentioned before that Grant's cabin, they bought it.
Mm-hmm.
They relocated it to Log Cabin Lane, which is named Log Cabin Lane for a reason. They're at the end of Frisco, right next to Murdoch.
Mm-hmm.
That's where they had their office. And they built everything around it.
Guys, I hate to do this. I'm gonna have to run.
Yeah. I do
What kind
too.
of impact does that have?
Actually, I think this is going to get tabled until we find out from Mara how we proceed.
Yeah, I agree. I think, again, sorry guys, I kind of pushed that letter just because we had that deadline
Oh, that
to
had to
get
happen.
something submitted. I feel like now that that's kind of out of the way, we definitely need to shift our focus back to what we would like to accomplish. You know, Stephen, I think that this is very fascinating, and I think there's probably more to be found and worth looking into. I also think it kind of ties together with what we were talking about earlier with different style houses, and you know, how do we go about saving some of those that are possibly going to be lost moving forward. So I think that this is kind of a good discussion that we should bring to the table at our next month's meeting.
I can also report just really quickly that there are a couple of other names. I was parked there for a minute on part of building permit. John Berg and the Payne brothers may have built more houses than the Joys.
Oh, wow.
It's just ridiculous how many houses they built.
I actually think I might have information about my house that was Berg
Okay,
built.
that wouldn't surprise me. They are, and there are long periods where the Joys didn't seem to build anything, but Berg kept going. I mean, he every year he was building houses.
So as you're saying that name, Stephen, I have the 1919 tax record up, or 1920, because you gave me an idea. I said I still can't find my house permit wise. I actually did on June 1st in the 1920 tax record on June 1st, 1919. I found my address, my lot, which is super frustrating because apparently like the back end of my yard was just cut off and given to, which, you know, I don't know. I would have liked my yard to back up to the Larson Park area instead of having a neighbor on the back end, but I have a big yard either way. But it says Augusta Berg is to whom the tax was assessed.
That would not surprise me. The Payne brothers and John Berg are.
And how are you spelling his name? B-U-R-K or B-E-R-K or what is his name?
B-E-R-G.
B-E-R-G.
Oh, I think I found where he lived. I think he lived off Kirkham. Along that stretch, kind of across from Larson Park, where there's the new builds. I believe one of his houses, or if it was the one that he lived in, was there at that time and then was demolished.
Yeah, I must live in an area that he made for his family then, because there's Augusta Berg, there's Fred Berg, George Berg, Henry Berg.
Yeah, like I said, I think when we get done with the Joys, we should start looking at these other guys, because if we want to save everything, that's how we're going to have to do it.
Mhm.
Okay, well, I
Right.
think we kind of have a plan for our next month's meeting. Hopefully we will get a couple of new members. We'll definitely have to appoint a vice chair and a secretary because Mara is not gonna let that go. And I think we definitely focus on our potential projects, as well as kind of picking Mara's brain about what it takes for historic designation and how we go about starting to do that possibly. So does anybody have any other questions? I'll make sure to get in touch with Mara about the letter so we can make sure that's wrapped up and ready to go by tomorrow so she has time to submit it. Again, if you have any other feedback or anything you want her to include, get that to her ASAP. Otherwise, do we have a motion to dismiss?
I move to dismiss.
I will second that.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you so much, Travis, for sitting in. We appreciate getting us up and ready and hanging in the long haul with us. And everybody have a great week and a great month.
Night.
Thank you.
All right. Okay.
Good night.